times we can start to coast. And it doesn't mean you necessarily fall away and become apostate in that state, but you can kind of stop growing. I liken it, if you wanted to bodybuilding. You reach a certain size, and you're like, that's good. I'll just maintain. And sometimes there's nothing wrong with maintaining, but in our spirit, we need to keep growing. Maintaining isn't really an option. We need to just constantly keep growing more into the image of Jesus Christ. So that's what we're going to look at today, remaining faithful to God. All right, let's go ahead and pray. Holy Father in heaven, once again, thank you for this time. Thank you for your word as we've prayed before, handed down to us through the ages. But today, Lord, please unlock your word. There's so many things in there. It's so dynamic. It's just living and breathing, has a life of its own because it talks about you, and anything that has anything to do with you is dynamic and living and breathing and feeds you in the moment and gives you new nourishment all the time. Even the same words read again can reveal something more about you. So please help us today as we look into your word to have more revealed about you so we can grow more into the image of your Son, Jesus Christ. So we ask and pray all these things in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, guys, let's get to it. It starts out by asking, what does it mean to be consistent in something? If you are consistent, what do you think that even means? For good or bad? Because I think you can be consistently good and consistently bad too, can't you? Yeah, so what does that mean to be consistent? You're reliable, you do the same things?
Regularly occurs.
Regularly occurs? Hey, you're consistent, whether it's a good habit, bad habit. So it asks, what are the benefits of being consistent? Are there any benefits? Can there be drawbacks? Are there benefits? Very nice. Well, again, if you're consistently doing a bad habit, obviously that can drag you down. But let's talk about the good ones then. What are the benefits of being consistent?
Get good at something. I mean, Olympic athletes wouldn't be where they're
So you
at.
develop skills, develop a skill set, especially a specific skill set. Because if you're consistent in one thing, it doesn't mean you're the best at everything. So good, you develop a specific skill set. What do you think?
Focus brings benefit. So the opposite of consistency would be just a constant opportunistic mindset that can be not bad necessarily, but distracting and energy diffusing. So
Yeah.
consistency concentrates energy.
Yep,
Goes along with developing a skill and getting good at something.
it really does. Because again, as you just mentioned, to be inconsistent can, at worst, even create chaos. So it creates order, creates focus, it creates self-discipline. How about self-confidence in an area? You know what you know. You can do what you can do. You become self-confident. How about other people seeing you, as you mentioned, trust? Especially if you're consistent in what society considers a good thing, you can develop trust in that area. Momentum. You get good at what you do. You can build momentum in an area. I was on a drill team where we threw M1 Garands with bayonets on it. We literally got to where we could do it blindfolded and throw them over people. You'd smack the butt of that, you'd throw it, and stick your hand out, and the other one's right there. I mean, it was just, but we did it so many times. And we'd line up, and the commander would come up, do an about face, and just charge right through the middle of us. And we'd throw them, and they'd be an inch in front of him, an inch behind him. But he knew we weren't going to hit him. We'd done it so many times. Fearlessly turn and fearlessly charge. I mean, he did it with authority, charge right back through again. So you get your weapon back because you just threw it to the other guy. So you get it back. You build momentum, you build self-confidence, you build ability. You learn, and eventually it can become your reputation, your legacy. If you take it all the way out, consistency in something, people will remember you for that. So with that being said, it says, whatever his circumstance, we find Daniel always trusting, seeking the Lord's wisdom, and today's story shows God's faithfulness and the ways that Daniel was constant in his walk with God and how it strengthened his faith, even in the face of death. So our first reading today is Daniel 6, verses 3 through 5. Daniel 6, 3 through 5, our first reading.
Now Daniel so distinguished himself among the administrators and the satraps by his exceptional qualities that the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom. At this, the administrators and the satraps tried to find grounds for charges against Daniel in his conduct of government affairs, but they were unable to do so. They could find no corruption in him because he was trustworthy and neither corrupt nor negligent. Finally, these men said, "We will find any basis for charges against this man, Daniel, unless it is something to do with his law of his God."
Thank you. So it appears that Daniel was pretty consistent. It says Daniel had distinguished himself among the administrators by his exceptional qualities. So in light of this, there arose a plot against Daniel by the administration, by the administrators. So it asks, although we are not exactly told the reason at this point, as it says, but why do you think they conspired against Daniel? Why do you think they started this conspiracy against him? Because if you look at what we've read so far. Jealousy, yeah. The king planned to set him over the whole kingdom underneath him. Isn't that something? You see that consistently with the saints in the Bible that are consistent in following God. I know we're different from the world. We're, in a sense, aliens walking through this society that is set against God. But yet you still find favor in people's eyes because you're living clean and living according to God's will. Isn't that something? Of course, there will be stinkers in there. You get the good and the bad and the ugly, like a Clint Eastwood movie. You got the good and the bad and the ugly out there. So I might be the last part of that. But you do find favor a lot of times living according to God's will. So yeah, jealousy would be the main reason. You ever work at a job and you're over there hustling, doing your thing, and then the guys come up and say, "Hey, slow down, you're making us look bad." You ever heard that? I've heard it plenty of times. You're making us look bad. That's just it. They need to do their jobs. I'm over here doing my job. Go do your job. You are making you look bad. But a lot of times they'll shift that because the collection of them are just doing that. And again, wrong is wrong even if everybody's doing it, and right is right even if you're the only one doing it. So you're over there doing your job, they'll come up and say, "Hey, knock it off, you're making us look bad." That's kind of what's happening here. Daniel is doing his job. He is being a faithful servant. He's doing what he's supposed to be doing it. And just like Joseph, when he surprised his, I'm trying to think, his master. Of course, his master's wife, that whole deal, we've talked about that. But he was amazed at how hard he worked. And it set him apart from the other servants. And he was elevated because of it. So it's the same thing. Even if the other people aren't doing your jobs, try not to fall into ranks with that. Try to consistently do your job because, again, it's as though you're working for the Lord. So consistently do your job. It says, in what ways can jealousy and envy lead us to ungodly action towards others? What happens when you're jealous? What's going on inside? How can that lead you to ungodly actions towards others? Yep, can make people angry, disgusted, and upset. At the basis of anger, what are you saying about God? Because everything is in relation to God. At the base of anger, what's going on? What are you saying about God? If somebody else has this or can do that, you're saying that God isn't big enough. He didn't give you that. He can't give you that. So I want what he has. God is plenty big enough to give you the same thing, if not more. So jealousy is actually a slapping God, as they say proverbially, in words, in the face. Saying he's not big enough. He can't give you that, so I want what that person has. So what does it say about Daniel that his opponents have difficulty finding grounds for charges against him? They started looking at his life with a microscope, trying to find something wrong. What does that say? That they basically couldn't find anything wrong with him. He really is a good guy. Yeah, he's living clean. There was no corruption. And I'm sure this probably surprised them, because corruption a lot of times, and I know I'm generalizing, so corruption oftentimes can be found, especially when you get into situations where people have extra time, extra money, extra. They say power corrupts. You've probably heard that phrase. A person has to be careful to keep giving God the credit, staying in their lane, and moving forward the way they should be moving. Otherwise, you can let these things get to your head, and you can start to basically mess up. So the administrators have to find a way to use Daniel's faith. It's the only thing they could find was Daniel's faith. So here you have to be a wordsmith. You have to get creative and figure out some way to twist this. And almost everything good can be perverted in some way. I was talking with a friend recently, and we were talking about technology. How it can be such a good thing, but it seems like every time a new form of technology comes out, someone finds a way to twist it and use it for things that are ungodly. So you have to set yourself apart from that. Do not use that in that fashion. Use it in a godly fashion. Well, they're going to have to make something up, it looks like. So it says, how do you think the administrators know about David's faith in God? So if you're reading between the lines, in the first place, how do you think they even know to try to use this against him? How do you think they know about Daniel's faith in God?
Again, because of his consistency.
His consistency, yep. Yep. And he likely, if someone is a Christian, you know that once you start to meet them, that becomes evident. They act, I've had someone say one time years ago, there's something different about you. What is it? And he could tell there was something different. And we'd run around together quite a few weekends. I worked with him, met him at work. We kind of befriended each other. And then on the weekends, we'd hang out and do things. He was into sports and lifting weights and doing things. And as you can tell, I haven't done that in a while, but that was back then. But with that being said, as I interacted with other people, he was watching. People are always watching. Whether you sit down and do it and really enjoy it, or whether you just do it on the fly in your daily life, people are always watching each other. And he said that, there's something different about you. What is it? I said, I don't know. I do this, I do that. He's like, no, that's not it. No, that's not it. And I just kept going through things, and finally I said, I'm a born-again Christian. He said, that's it. He said, that's got to be it. He said, I notice how you react with people and what you do. So evidently Daniel was living cleanly enough, and as you said, consistently enough. And I'm sure if somebody, I don't shy away from talking about God and Jesus too. At work, you're supposed to separate church and state in a sense. So I have to be careful as far as running up to somebody and saying, Jesus loves you, to everybody. So, but if the topic comes up, the door opens and I'm right there, you know. So I'm sure he was the same way. He wasn't shy about talking about things. If they said, what's different about you? There's something different. So it was public enough that they knew about it and then were able to consider it. So our next reading is Daniel 6, verses 6 through 10, if we have a volunteer.
So these administrators and satraps went as a group to the king and said, May King Darius live forever. The royal administrators, prefects, satraps, advisors, and governors have all agreed that the king should issue an edict and enforce the decree that anyone who prays to any god or human being during the next 30 days except you, your majesty, shall be thrown into the lion's den. Now, your majesty, issue the decree and put it in writing so that it cannot be altered in accordance with the law of the Medes and Persians, which cannot be repeated. So King Darius put the decree in writing. Now when Daniel learned that there was a decree that had been published, he went home to his upstairs room where the windows opened toward Jerusalem. 3 times a day he got down on his knees and prayed, giving thanks to his God, just as he had done before.
There you go. And there's a window. Evidently, they had consistently seen him worshiping, openly worshiping God. So it says Daniel's opponents go to King Darius and ask him to throw anyone praying to anyone else or anything other than the king. If they do this during the next 30 days, he's to throw them into the lion's den. And Darius agrees. So here's a question. In what way can power blind someone, blind a leader, from seeing the consequences of their actions? In what ways can power blind someone or a leader from seeing the consequences of their actions? Because you're going too far with it? Yep.
Well, as good of a job as Daniel was doing, which any leader wants that on his team.
Oh, absolutely.
And here we find that Darius becomes focused on being the center of Daniel's life. And so he sets up this scenario where Daniel's going to be in conflict.
Mm-hmm.
And he sets before Daniel a choice. He's going to have to choose between obeying the king's edict or his regular prayer time.
Yep.
Which incidentally, I would just want to share this little illustration. We were at that water park in Rockford with the girls this summer, and I was way up on top of one of the slides, waiting to get on the slide, you know. And I looked out over the park, and there was a Muslim family back behind one of the buildings. They had removed themselves from everybody's attention, and they were back behind one of the buildings. There were about 6 or 7 in this family, and they all had their prayer rugs down,
Mm-hmm.
and they were all kneeling in prayer. And it was striking, to say the least, to see that they took a break in playing on the water slides to pray.
Yeah.
And you can, at the very least, that speaks of their consistency.
Mm-hmm.
No matter what's going on, we're gonna pray to the east.
Yep.
And they stopped everything to do it. And in our culture, that's a conflict. We're a 24/7 rip-roaring, lights on all the time culture. And for us to do what we are being called to do by our Heavenly Father, to prioritize
Mm-hmm.
the mission of the kingdom, we're at some point going to be in conflict. And, you know,
absolutely.
I just, it's an interesting, you know, comparison and observation.
And that consistency is it can be an absolute blessing. It can carry you through consistency when other things fall short. My father-in-law owned a construction business, and he had a man who worked for him before I even started with my father-in-law, and I worked with him for years. But this man was there already and worked with us, and I'm not going to mention his name. Some of you might have known him, but the point I'm bringing this up is he cost my father-in-law lots of money at different times, or at least money at different times. Sometimes it got kind of pricey with mistakes. He'd make mistakes, and I could tell you some stories. I won't, use the time up for that. But the point of the illustration is, at one point, I went up to my father-in-law, and I was just curious. I said, and his name was Glenn. I said, "Hey, Glenn, why do you keep that guy around?" And his answer was, "He's consistent." I said, "What does that mean?" Because he's making mistakes left and right. He literally would, and literally did, paint himself into a corner. So anyway, with that being said, even after instructions, not to, and pointing out, but I asked him, "Why do you keep that guy?" And he said, "You know why? He's consistent." He said, "He's always there. I can count on that guy always being there on time and in the right place. When I need a set of hands, they're right there." He said, "That speaks louder than almost anything else." He says, "I've had workers come and workers go, and they literally, some of them will come and go like a migrant whenever they please. They could take lunch and a worker would just walk off and not come back." So consistency, if you will stay consistent in the word, following Christ, that can cover so many other things, especially in our Father's eyes. You're trying, your heart's in the right place, you're consistent. So a lot can be said for consistency. So our last reading is Daniel chapter 6. It's the 15 through 16 and then 19 through 23, the rest of the reading, if someone wants to do it.
So the king gave the order and they brought David and threw him into the lion's den. Excuse me. The king said to Daniel, "May your God, whom you serve continually, rescue you." Oh, okay. We'll back up then. Then the men went as a group to King Darius and said to him, "Remember, your majesty, that according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, no decree or edict that the king issues can be changed." So the king gave the order, and they brought Daniel and threw him into the lion's den. The king said to Daniel, "May your God, whom you serve continually, rescue you." At the first light of dawn, the king got up and hurried to the lion's den. When he came near the den, he called to Daniel in an anguished voice, "Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to rescue you from the lions?" Daniel answered, May the king live forever. My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me, because I was found innocent in his sight, nor have I ever done anything wrong before you, your majesty. The king was overjoyed and gave orders to lift Daniel out of the den. And when Daniel was lifted from the den, no wound was found on him, because he had trusted in his God.
All right, says the officials go to the king and manipulate the situation. And of course, then they also inform him that Daniel has broken the law, this law that cannot be repealed or changed, because he did it, when he made the edict, he did it in such a way that with custom that it could not be changed. So now, it says, upon hearing this news, the king was greatly distressed and was determined to rescue Daniel and made every effort until sundown to save him. But he was unable to because of the way it was set up. Daniel was thrown into the lion's den. So that's the question, why do you think the king's initial response to this news, rather than anger, was distress? when he found out that someone was worshiping someone other than him for the next 30 days, why do you think his response was distress instead of how dare he do this? What do you think? Why do you think he was distressed instead of angry?
He was going to lose one of his best men.
There's a good start. Yeah. He was, again, consistent. He's always there, on time and in the right place. That can cover so many different things. I would say that's a good place to start. But he had grown to, if you read the book of Daniel, there were things that had happened previously where he had seen God at work, where he respected. I mean, even though he still was full of himself in his carnal flesh, being the leader over so many people, he still recognized Daniel's God. So it says Daniel was thrown into the lion's den, and the entrance was sealed. Now, here's a question from the onlooker's perspective, someone that was there at the time. What chance does Daniel have in the lion's den? None. It said they ran them lean. They were hungry. They weren't fat and contented. They were ravenous. A whole pack of them. And a pack of lions against one unarmed person, unless you're Samson, he did not stand a chance. So God rescues Daniel by shutting the lions' mouths. What does Daniel do in this situation? I'm sure he was praying. Where was his trust? Just like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, what did they say, if you recall that story? Yep. God is able, but even if he doesn't, I'm paraphrasing. Yeah, it was his will. He's sovereign. He gets to choose. We are his servants. Whatever he does, he does. That's his will. So that's basically what Daniel was doing here too. Okay. It doesn't say that he fought like crazy and cried for his mama. He just got thrown in the lion's den and he trusted God. So God rescues Daniel by shutting the lions' mouths. So, of course, and this kind of goes back to some of the previous parts in Daniel, why do you think Daniel had such faith in God? Had he seen anything happen before this? We know he's consistent, so he was consistently praising and worshiping, so his faith muscles were strong. He had flexed them so many times that even when this situation hit, he didn't falter. He just flexed his faith muscles. But had he likely seen anything before this that would give him trust? We just talked about the fiery furnace. Were they not part of the people also that didn't eat off the king's table because the food was offered to idols? But yet when they brought them in after eating vegetables and drinking water, were they not healthier than everyone else many times? He had seen God in action. And as Christians, you have too. You're to be faith experts. You're to be forgiveness experts. I know it might be hard to hear, especially the forgiveness expert part. 70 times 7. So we're to be experts in this, in faith. It says the men who falsely accused Daniel, what happened to them, if you know the rest of the story a little bit? Yep. They were tossed into the lion's den. And as you said, along with their families. So this shows you that not having faith, not living consistently, can bring down loved ones around you too. if you read between the lines. Your faith can save your family. But your faith or lack of or consistently doing bad things can bring ruin to your family. So that's important. All right, after that heavy comment, Daniel's life of faith was so visible that his opponents tried to twist it and use it against him. Daniel teaches us by example that no matter what we face, we can place our trust in God and know that He is with us. It didn't say to know that He will deliver you, because again, it's all for His glory. I've had people ask, we prayed for this and we believed. Why didn't it happen? Well, first off, everything happens for God's glory. So, you guys ready for your assignment this week? And then we'll get to fellowship. This week, how can you keep your faith consistent like Daniel? In what ways can you love God consistently as a servant and a Christian? So this week, how can you keep your faith consistent like Daniel? Through the highs, through the lows, through the person cutting you off in traffic. How can you keep your faith consistent and live that out this week and love God consistently? That's your assignment. All right, let's go ahead and pray, and we'll close, have some fellowship. Our beloved Father in heaven, once again, thank you for the story of your servant Daniel, having that written down so we can read about it, and most of all, learn about you, about the benefits, the blessings of getting to know you better, seeking you, keeping our faith consistent, knowing that you are able, in whatever situation, you are able to do what you want to do. And we just thank you so much for that. As we continue forward, Lord, in worship, because all of this is worship, so we praise you, Lord. I would lift your servant John Trotter up to you as he has prepared the sermon from your word, and as he delivers it, please let it hit open ears, open hearts, and fertile soil in there. So as it crosses the greatest distance on the planet, the distance between the ears and the heart, that it takes root. Please bless us today, and thank you for this opportunity to worship you. And we ask and pray and say all these things in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, we'll have corporate worship at about 10 o'clock. Thank you for joining us here at Living Well. nothing good comes of it.
I was thinking too, you know, to put it in contemporary terms, his friends or his cabinet, Darius's cabinet, had set Darius into an impossible situation too, a difficult situation.
Yeah.
It was like their constitution,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Yeah.
once ruling is.
Yeah. In that particular fashion. Yeah. There's no
cannot,
decree.
cannot be repealed.
Yep.
You know.
Oh. All right. in, Coach.
Put me in, coach.
I'm ready to play.